we turn now to Christopher Bedford, executive editor of the Common Sense Society Network. Chris, great to be with you today. A lot to discuss, but first, let's start off with a debate. Your thoughts, and who do you think came out on top last night?
I think the debate struggled last night. It struggled to hit relevance. I mean, there's news already out today that Republican donors, who are basically the only members of the party who aren't backing Donald Trump right now, and looking not for anyone on that stage, but for Glenn Youngkin, the governor of Virginia, excuse me, as a possible alternative to Donald Trump. Last night, the things that made candidates like Vivek Ramaswamy stand out were toned down. The things that made maybe people like Chris Christie, a standout candidate in the past, seemed weaker. His jokes fell flat. His attempts to really gain ground fell flat. After about an hour, I think it just really devolved. The moderators, Univision, asked some pretty suspicious questions. They took a lot of some left-wing conspiracy theories and went through them to the crowd. And I kind of found myself missing old Republican candidates like Newt Gingrich, who, when asked a bad question from a moderator, would so handily throw it back at them and get the crowd kind of in a cheering sort of way against the moderators. It's something that he always did very well. Donald Trump did that very well. I didn't really see any candidates last night who stood out, and certainly not the kind of thing that's going to make the difference in this race.
Yeah, and as Owen mentioned, I mean, there were a lot of jabs exchanged between the candidates last night, including some aimed at those who weren't on stage, namely the current frontrunner, former President Donald Trump. I mean, even though he wasn't taking part in last night's debate, Chris, his presence really still loomed large.
It absolutely did, and even very few people even wanted to talk about him. They kind of sniped at each other, and they're basically at his heels at this point as far as polling goes. Donald Trump decided instead to go to hold a rally in Detroit to talk to some of the strikers with the United Auto Workers, and then to give an exclusive interview to the Daily Caller's Henry Rogers. And he ended up coming out shining. You know, this is a strategy that I was surprised he took, because Trump's someone who really does like a fight. He doesn't like to stand aside. But by pushing these guys to the side and just not even engaging with them, his numbers in the polls have really only climbed. I mean, the only people who are really against him right now, strongly in the GOP, are the money holders. And that can be something that can play very badly for a candidate. But the same thing happened in 2016, and he got through it, and I suspect he will again.
Chris, what do you think was the big takeaway from last night?
That Trump's the front runner. I mean, that was the takeaway. In the first debate, a lot of these candidates hadn't really been introduced to the American people. Folks haven't really been tuning in that much. None of them really gained ground. The second debate seemed an unlikely thing for any of that to change. And I thought they would probably be trying to catch the eyes of some of these disaffected Republican megadonors who might want to back them if they found that they were the right person. And that hasn't materialized either. So the takeaway is Trump is probably going to be the GOP candidate, barring some catastrophic event.
Not a whole lot of time left, but I do want to turn to this. President Biden and the impeachment inquiry today. What stood out the most to you about these hearings, and where do you think all this is heading?
I think Raskin was flailing today, the lead Democrat on this panel, who was trying to push back and say there's no evidence, there's no evidence, there's no smoking gun, there's not even a squirt gun, he said. Well, that's not true. The evidence, the Republicans have been releasing evidence at a pretty solid clip. Just a few days ago, text messages back and forth between Hunter Biden. Now, Joe Biden, right now, they don't have a smoking gun that connects Joe Biden to this. They have checks going to Joe Biden's house in Hunter's name while Hunter was living in California. And now they have more text messages with Hunter Biden saying that he is doing these business deals for his father. Now, we don't have that admission from Joe Biden, who seems to be a little more careful than that. But Democrats saying that there's no evidence here, that's not correct at all. And the evidence is really starting to mount. And I think Republicans have a chance of really breaking through and painting this administration, at least in time for the next election, as a corrupt one.
Yeah, we're going to see what happens from here. Chris, great to be with you. Thank you so much for your insights, as always. Appreciate it.
Thank you.